Okay, I want to run a scenario by you. Picture this. It's a Tuesday night. You're feeling, well, let's just call it stuck.
Stuck is a good word for it. We've all been there.
Totally. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's this, vague sense of existential dread that creeps in after 9 p.m. Or maybe you just procrastinated for 6 hours on social media and now the guilt is setting in.
The doom scroll hangover. It's a real thing.
It is. So what do? You go online or maybe you walk into a store and you buy a solution.
The distinct immediate dopamine hit of that add to cart button.
Right. You buy the book with the neon orange cover that promises to unfuck your brain, or the one about the 7 habits, or the 48 laws, or the subtle art of not giving a damn.
All the classics.
And you hold that book in your hands, and for a moment you feel fantastic. You haven't read a single word, you haven't changed a single behavior, but just owning the book, it makes you feel like a new person.
It's because you have purchased the identity of a person who has their life together. It's what you call aspirational consumption.
That is exactly it. But here's the problem, and honestly, it's the whole reason we're doing this deep dive today. Fast forward 6 months, that book, it's on your nightstand.
If you're lucky, it might be in a box in the garage.
True. And it's functioning primarily as a coaster for a coffee mug. And you are the exact same person, dealing with the exact same problems, just maybe $25 poorer?
Welcome to the pile of good intentions. I think everyone listening knows what that pile looks like.
We have all been there. I have a stack right now that is actively judging me from across the room. But when you zoom out, this isn't just about my dusty nightstand or your unread Kindle library. We're talking about an industrial scale phenomenon. I was looking at the numbers we pulled for this, and they're just staggering.
They really are. We're looking at a market worth nearly $3 billion a year in the U.S. alone. And get this. That data point is actually a bit dated. It's from around 2012.
So it's probably way higher now.
Oh, significantly higher, especially post-pandemic, with a huge surge in mental health awareness. Just look at the print units. In 2019, 18.6 million self-help books were sold.
18.6
million.
It's a massive amount of paper and ink, all dedicated to this underlying idea that we're somehow broken and need fixing.
And that leads us right to the central tension we really need to unpack today. It's the billion-dollar question. If 18 million of these cures are being sold every single year, why aren't we cured?
Right. Are we actually becoming more fulfilled as a society, or are we just becoming incredibly well-read experts on our own dysfunction?
That is the mission. We are going to audit the self-help industry.
And I want to be really clear right up front, because I know we have listeners who swear by these books, and for good reason sometimes. We aren't here just to trash the genre.
No, not at all. But we aren't going to blindly praise it either. We've got a stack of sources here: clinical psychology studies, fascinating historical analyses, and data on something called bibliotherapy. And we're going to figure out if reading these books actually moves the needle on human happiness.
And knowing you and looking at this outline, I'm going to guess the answer isn't a simple yes or no.
If it were that simple, this would be a very, very short deep dive. The research suggests a really complex relationship. There's this profound difference between the sensation of reading and the actual mechanics of doing. And frankly, the industry often relies on us confusing the two.
Okay, so walk us through the roadmap. How do we even begin to tackle a topic this big?
Well, I think we have to start with the history, because self-help didn't start in the 1980s with some guru on an infomercial. It's ancient, and the meaning of the term has shifted in a way that I think explains a lot of our modern anxiety around it.
Okay, history first, then what?
Then we'll look at the yes argument, the cognitive mechanisms for why these books actually can work. Then, of course, we have to look at the dark side, the false hope syndrome, and the studies suggesting these books can, believe it or not, sometimes make you feel worse.
Worse. Okay, I'm interested in that.
And then we've got the hard data on effectiveness. And finally, we're going to dissect what I think is the most important part, the implementation gap, which is where, I'd argue, 90% of the failure happens.
I want to start right there with that history piece. Because, like you said, when I hear self-help, I think of infomercials, I think of Tony Robbins, I think of buzzwords. It feels like such a modern capitalist invention. But you're saying the roots go back way, way further.
Much further. I mean, if you strip away the slick marketing and the Instagram-friendly quotes, the basic human urge to codify how to live a good life is as old as literacy itself. You can go all the way back to ancient Egypt.
Really? Ancient Egypt?
Absolutely. They had these texts called sabbat, which literally translates to teachings. And they were basically codes of conduct, how to speak, how to act in court, how to be successful. It was the original career advice.
So the 7 habits of highly effective pharaohs isn't a new idea.
Not at all. And then you jump forward to classical Rome. You've got Cicero, you've got Ovid. Cicero wrote a whole book called On Duties. It was essentially a guide to moral obligation and how to navigate your social networks. It was, I'm not kidding, how to win friends and influence people, just in Latin and with more toga.
I guess the core anxieties of, am I doing this right? Or do people like me? Are just universal constants in the human experience.
Precisely. And you can even look at most religious texts, the Bible, the Stoic writings of Marcus Aurelius, the Buddhist sutras. They serve this function. They were manuals for navigating the sheer difficulty of being human. They offered a framework. But, and this is a critical pivot point in our research, the actual term self-help as a specific genre label that drops in 1859.
1859. That has to be Samuel Smiles, right?
Right.
I saw that name in the prep material.
You got it. Samuel Smiles. He publishes a book literally titled Self-Help. It becomes one of the massive bestsellers of the Victorian era. I mean, it sold more copies than almost anything else at the time, except for the Bible.
Wow.
But the fascinating thing that the historians in our source material point out is that self-help meant something completely different to Smiles and his readers than it does to us today.
Different how? I always assumed it was the same old pull yourself up by your bootstraps message.
It was, but with a major caveat. In that 19th century context, self-help was deeply intertwined with the idea of mutual aid.
Mutual aid, like helping each other.
Exactly. It was about character building, yes, but often within the context of community support. The idea was something like, improve yourself so you aren't a burden on society and so that you have the capacity to then lift up your neighbor. It was civic-minded.
Oh, that is a huge shift. Because today, if I'm reading a book on high performance or unleashing the giant within, it's usually so I can get the promotion, so I can get the bigger house, so I can win. It feels like a zero-sum game.
Exactly. The sociologists in our sources call this shift self-fashioning. Over the last 150 years, we've moved from a model of character building for the collective good to our model of hyper-individualism. Modern self-help is often about constructing your own narrative, totally independent of your circumstances.
Right. It suggests that if you just change your mindset, you can overcome anything. Systemic economic issues, bad luck, chronic health problems.
It puts the entire burden of success or failure squarely on the individual's shoulders. If you're poor or unhappy or lonely, it's not society's fault. It's because you didn't visualize hard enough or manifest your reality correctly.
That creates a tremendous amount of pressure.
It really does. And notice what got lost in that transition. We used to rely on what you might call folk wisdom. You'd learn how to cope with grief from your grandmother. You'd learn the value of hard work from the village elders or your master craftsman. That knowledge transmission was communal and it was free.
And now?
Now, we have stripped out the grandmother, we've packaged her advice into 5 easy steps, and we sell it back to you for $16.99.
We monetize the village elder. That is, well, it's kind of depressing, actually. But it explains why the whole genre feels so transactional now.
It's the commercialization of wisdom. And it sets the stage for why we feel so lonely in this pursuit. We're trying to solve fundamental human problems, which are often social, with a product that we consume in total isolation.
Okay, so we've defined the self-help part and its history, but the title of this dive is, Does It Lead to Self-Fulfillment? That term fulfillment, it feels a little squishy to me.
It can be, yeah.
I mean, if I eat a really good pizza, I'm fulfilled. If I climb Mount Everest, I'm also fulfilled. How are we defining this for the sake of the argument today?
That's a great question. We absolutely need a rigorous definition, or we're just talking about fleeting feelings.
Yeah.
The sources point us straight to Aristotle. He had this concept called eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia, I've heard that.
It's often translated simply as happiness, but a much better translation is flourishing.
Flourishing. I like that a lot better than happiness. Happiness feels like a mood, it comes and goes. Flourishing feels like a state of being, like a healthy plant.
Exactly. For Aristotle, flourishing wasn't a mood at all. It was an activity. It was the realization of human potential. You aren't flourishing because you feel good. You are flourishing because you are actively using your capacities to their fullest extent. Your functioning as a human should function.
So it's a verb. You are doing fulfillment. It's not something you just have.
Yes. And if we jump forward a couple thousand years to the 20th century, we have Abraham Maslow. Everyone knows his pyramid.
Right. Food and shelter at the bottom. Wi-Fi somewhere in the middle now.
Huh, probably. And at the very pinnacle, self-actualization. Maslow defined that peak as becoming everything one is capable of becoming.
Hmm.
And then the philosopher Alan Gewerth added another layer, defining it as carrying to fruition one's deepest desires or one's worthiest capacities.
Carrying to fruition. That sounds like labor. That sounds like actual work.
It is work.
Yeah.
And that brings us right back to that book on your nightstand. The core question of this entire deep dive is this. Can a passive activity, just moving your eyes across a page of text, actually bridge the gap between where you are now and that high-level Aristotelian flourishing? Can a book do the heavy lifting of carrying your desires to fruition?
Let's play devil's advocate for the yes side first, because I really don't want to be too cynical. I've read books that genuinely shifted my perspective on something. I'm sure you have too. There has to be real value there, right?
Absolutely. And we shouldn't dismiss that for a second. The research highlights several specific pathways where self-help is genuinely effective and contributes to well-being. The first one is what we might call knowledge and frameworks.
Is this the naming the demon effect? That's what I call it.
That's a great way to put it. Imagine you're struggling with anxiety. You feel this tightness in your chest. Your thoughts are racing. You have this sense of impending doom. But you don't know what it is. You just think you're crazy or broken or maybe even dying.
Which just makes the anxiety worse.
Of course. Then you pick up a book and it describes your symptoms perfectly. It gives you the vocabulary. It says, this is generalized anxiety disorder.
That moment of validation is huge. I'm not broken. I'm just experiencing anxiety. Other people have this.
It reduces that feeling of isolation instantly. And beyond just naming it, good self-help provides cognitive frameworks. A lot of the best-selling books, especially the ones that have been around for a while, are essentially CBT light.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, yeah.
Exactly. They package these proven therapeutic techniques for the layperson.
I've seen this 1,000 times. They explain that loop. A thought leads to a feeling, which leads to an action.
Right. And you don't need a PhD in psychology to understand that loop if it's explained well. If a book can teach you a simple technique to catch a negative thought before it spirals into a full-blown panic attack, that's a tangible, valuable tool. That's the cognitive benefit. It exposes readers to mental models they simply wouldn't encounter in their daily lives.
It's democratizing that knowledge. Not everyone has a psychologist in the family who can explain how the brain works.
Correct. So that's the head game. Then you have the heart game, motivation and agency.
Agency is a big word in these sources. It comes up a lot.
It is, and it's so important. It's the opposite of passivity. The very act of walking into a store and buying a self-help book is a declaration of intent. You're shifting your locus of control from external to internal. You're saying, I am not just a victim of my circumstances. I am the architect of my life.
So even if you don't finish the book, the act of buying it is an act of hope in itself.
The sources call it the hope factor. And we see this powered by the narratives in these books. It's almost always the same structure, right? The author was broke, divorced, depressed, living under a bridge. Then they discovered the method.
And now they're a millionaire with a perfect life, speaking to sold-out arenas.
It's the classic hero's journey. And it serves as a proof of concept. It tells the reader's brain, transformation is biologically possible. Someone else did it, so it's not impossible for me.
And there's actual data on this, isn't there? The positive psychology interventions study.
There is. A big meta-analysis looked at positive psychology interventions, which is the academic term for a lot of the things you find in these books. Gratitude journals, identifying your personal strengths, mindfulness exercises.
So did it show real results? Or just make people feel good for a day?
No, it showed real, statistically significant results. They found a standardized mean difference of 0.34 regarding subjective well-being.
Okay, let's unpack that number for a second. 0.34. In the world of social science, is that good? Is that a big deal?
In social science, that's respectable. It's not a miracle cure. Let's be clear. It won't take you from suicidal to ecstatic overnight. But it is a statistically significant bump. It means these tools, even when they're self-administered from a book, can actually move the needle on life satisfaction.
And on top of all that, we can't ignore the accessibility factor. Therapy is what, $150, $200 an hour? A book is $15.
Or it's free at the library. And it's available at 3 in the morning when you're having a panic attack and you can't call a doctor. For millions of people, especially in a country like the U.S. where healthcare access is what it is, self-help books are the only mental health resource they have access to. So we have to respect the medium for that democratization.
Okay, that's the sunny side of the street. It gives us words for our problems, it gives us hope, and it's cheap and accessible. But now we have to turn the corner. Because for every one person who reads a book and truly turns their life around, there seem to be 10 people who read a book, feel a temporary buzz, and then crash even harder than before.
And now we have officially entered false hope syndrome territory.
This concept really stood out to me in the notes. It almost sounds like a medical diagnosis. What is the mechanism here? What's happening in our brains?
It's a vicious cycle of unrealistic expectations. You have to think about the marketing. Publishers know that a book titled Change is Slow, Hard, and Nonlinear isn't going to sell.
No, that's not a bestseller.
So they sell Change Your Life in 30 Days. They sell The One Secret to Effortless Wealth.
Oh.
They sell Lose the Weight Without Ever Dieting.
So the reader goes in expecting a miracle, a quantum leap.
They do. They get that initial dopamine hit from the purchase. They start the program. They're full of motivation. But then reality sets in. Change is boring. You have setbacks. You have days where you slide back into old habits. And when that rapid cinematic transformation doesn't happen, the reader doesn't blame the marketing. They blame themselves.
The author did it. The testimonials on the back cover say everyone else did it. I read the whole book and I'm still anxious. I must be the failure. I'm uniquely broken.
Precisely. It internalizes the failure. And to soothe that new pain of failure, what do you think they do?
They go looking for the next solution.
The next book. The next guru. It becomes a treadmill of consumption rather than production. You're constantly buying the feeling of solving the problem without ever actually solving it.
That connects directly to that University of Waterloo study about affirmations. That one really blew my mind because daily affirmations are the absolute bread and butter of this industry.
Yeah.
Look in the mirror and tell yourself you're beautiful.
I am successful. I am wealthy. I am a lovable person.
And the study basically says, stop doing that.
It says stop doing that if you have low self-esteem. And this is such a fascinating counterintuitive piece of psychology. The researchers took a group of people with low self-esteem, the exact target demographic for these books,
Yeah.
and had them repeat positive self-statements like, I am a lovable person.
Okay, and what happened?
They actually felt worse afterwards.
Worse. How is that even possible?
It's because of the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
The gap. If your deep-seated core belief, your internal reality is I am a failure or I am unlovable, and you force yourself to say the opposite, your brain immediately recognizes the conflict. It acts like an internal lie detector. It screams, no, you're not. Look at your bank account. Look at your failed relationships. You're lying to yourself.
Wow. So it essentially just highlights the massive distance between where you are and where you want to be. It shines a spotlight on the deficit.
Exactly. It triggers a powerful counterargument in your head that actually reinforces the original negative belief.
Yeah.
So the whole fake it till you make it advice can be psychologically damaging if the gap between your reality and the affirmation is just too wide. It's like stretching a rubber band until it snaps back and hits you in the face.
That is just wild. And there was another study, right, from the University of Montreal. That one seemed to back this up. They found that consumers of self-help books actually showed higher levels of stress and more depressive symptoms than non-consumers.
Now, with that one, we have to be really careful with causality. It's the classic chicken and the egg problem.
Right. Do the books cause the depression? Or do depressed people buy the books? Happy, well-adjusted people probably aren't buying How to Stop Being Miserable.
Exactly. It's very, very likely that people who are already stressed and struggling are the ones seeking out these books in the first place. However, the sources suggest it might be a bit of a mix, a kind of toxic cocktail. You have a person who is already sensitive to stress. You give them a false hope narrative. They try the oversimplified solution. They inevitably fail to achieve the promised miracle, and that failure deepens their depressive symptoms. It just confirms their secret bias that they are unfixable.
And so many of these books are oversimplified. They almost have to be to sell to a mass market.
That's the cookie cutter problem. Humans are incredibly complex biological and social organisms. A book that says, just change your mindset, completely ignores the fact that you might be working 3 jobs to make rent, or dealing with systemic racism, or grieving the death of a parent, or have a legitimate thyroid issue that's affecting your mood.
It gaslights you into thinking that everything is under your personal control when so much of life actually isn't.
It creates what they call a fantasy self that is completely detached from your reality. And when reality wins, which, by the way, it always does, the reader's left holding the bag and feeling like a failure.
Okay, so we've got a strong yes argument regarding frameworks and hope, but a really terrifying no argument when it comes to false hope and oversimplification. I want to look at the hard data now. Is there any solid proof that this stuff works in a clinical sense? Like, is a book ever as good as a doctor?
This brings us to the field of bibliotherapy, which sounds very fancy, but it's just the clinical practice of prescribing books as part of a treatment plan. And surprisingly, the data here is actually quite robust if, and this is a big if, you pick the right kind of book.
Okay, show me the receipts. What did the studies find?
Well, a researcher named Forrest Scogan at the University of Alabama did a landmark study on mild to moderate depression. They didn't just tell people to go buy any book. They gave patients a specific set of self-help books that were based on proven therapeutic methods. It was basically a reading prescription.
And the result?
The results were pretty incredible. They found that 2/3 of the participants showed significant improvement in their depressive symptoms.
2/3? That's comparable to the success rates of some medications in clinical trials.
In that specific study, it matched the rates of improvement for patients undergoing therapist-led treatment. There was another big trial at the University of Nevada using David Byrne's classic book, Feeling Good.
Oh yeah, that's the CBT Bible. I feel like everyone's aunt has a dog-eared copy of that one.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
And they found that reading it resulted in mood improvement that was comparable to antidepressants and the usual standard of care for mild depression. So the answer is yes. For specific conditions, a well-chosen book can be a potent medical device.
But you keep emphasizing specific conditions and well-chosen.
This is the most crucial distinction that our sources make. We have to separate problem-focused books from growth-oriented books. They are not the same thing at all.
Okay, break that down for me.
Problem-focused is exactly what it sounds like. I have insomnia. How do I sleep better? I have panic attacks. How do I stop them? I have a phobia of spiders, and I want to get over it.
Yeah.
These books tend to be based on specific clinical protocols, like CBT or ACT. They're basically therapy manuals. They have empirical support because the goal is clear and the outcome is measurable.
Got it. And growth-oriented.
That's the vague, fuzzy stuff, how to find your purpose, how to become a better leader, how to be happier, the whole live your best life genre.
So basically the entire front table at Barnes & Noble.
Exactly, the big bestsellers. The research shows that the claims in these books are much more hit or miss. They're harder to test scientifically, and they're often filled with pseudoscience, anecdotes presented as data, or just one person's charismatic opinion.
And there was a stat in the notes about a quality crisis that I found pretty disturbing. Some researchers analyzed the top 50 best-selling self-help books. What did they find in there?
It was pretty grim. They found that only 48% of them, less than half, included techniques that were actually backed by scientific evidence.
So it's literally a coin flip whether the advice you're getting has any basis in reality.
Pretty much. And it gets worse. Only 34% of them address long-term maintenance or how to keep the change going after you finish the book. So basically, you walk into a bookstore, you grab a bestseller, and you have a greater than 50% chance of reading something that is just someone's opinion with good marketing.
There's no FDA for self-help books.
None whatsoever. It is a completely unregulated industry. Anyone can write a book claiming to have the secret. And because the barrier to entry is just writing a PDF and uploading it to Amazon, the market is just flooded with noise.
That makes the question, does it work, almost impossible to answer because the quality of the input varies so wildly. It's like asking, is food good for you? Well, it depends. Are you eating a fresh salad or are you eating a bowl of gravel?
That's the perfect analogy.
Okay, but let's say I'm a smart consumer. I do my research. I buy a good book. I buy Feeling Good. I buy the evidence-based, problem-focused manual. Why do I still fail? Why is my bookshelf a graveyard of good intentions?
And now we arrive at what I believe is the most critical part of this entire deep dive, the critical missing piece. The sources call it the compliance problem, but I prefer to call it the knowing-doing gap.
The gap between what's in your brain and what your hands actually do.
Precisely. And there is one study that I think perfectly, if painfully, encapsulates this whole problem. It's the Kohlenberg migraine study. Now, migraines are excruciating. I don't know if you've ever had one, but they are absolutely debilitating.
Oh, I have. I would do almost anything to get rid of one when it hits.
Right. So the motivation for relief should be a 10 out of 10. The researchers gave a group of migraine sufferers a proven self-help book for migraine relief. It contained specific exercises, diet changes, things that were known to help. Guess what percentage of people in the study read the whole book?
Okay. Given the pain, I want to say at least 50%, maybe 60.
20%. Only 1 in 5 people who were in debilitating pain even finished reading the texts that promised relief.
Only 20%. That is shockingly low.
But just wait, it gets much worse. Guess how many of them actually complied with all of the exercises and suggestions in the book?
Oh, boy. I'm scared to guess. 10%.
2 to 4%.
You're kidding me. 2 to 4%.
That is the statistic that should haunt the entire industry. 2 to 4% implementation.
That is just dismal. It's nothing.
So when we ask, does self-help work?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is often irrelevant because we don't work. The book might work. The technique in the book might work. But the human element, the follow-through, fails almost every time.
But why? Why are we so bad at this? Is it just laziness?
It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
One of our sources used a map analogy that I thought was just brilliant. Imagine you want to go to Paris. So you buy a map of Paris, a really detailed one. You study the map, you highlight the Eiffel Tower, you trace the route along the Seine with your finger, you learn all the names of the streets, you feel really, really knowledgeable about Paris.
But you are still sitting on your couch in Ohio. You haven't gone anywhere.
Exactly. The map is not the territory. Reading is a passive intellectual activity. It happens in your prefrontal cortex. But changing your life, actual behavioral change, that's a physical, often emotional activity. It involves your whole body, your habits, your environment. They are completely different brain states.
But reading feels like work. That's the trap, right? I highlight things. I underline passages. I put little sticky notes in. I feel so productive. Look at me. I'm learning. I'm improving.
That is the illusion of progress. It's intellectual entertainment that's masquerading as self-improvement. You are categorizing the problem, you're analyzing the problem, maybe you're even brilliantly understanding the problem, but you are not solving the problem. You are just becoming a more sophisticated complainer.
So if I am the listener and I'm having this dawning horror that I'm in the 96% who doesn't do the work, how do I fix that? Do the experts have a solution for the solution?
They do, but it requires a radical fundamental change in how we read these books. The first strategy is actually borrowed from an old religious practice called Lectio Divina.
Divine reading. Sounds intense.
It is. It's an ancient practice of reading scripture, but we can apply it here to self-development. It's the practice of reading incredibly slowly, ruminating, not rushing to finish the chapter, but reading one single paragraph and then putting the book down and sitting with it for 10 minutes, asking yourself, how does this apply to me today in my actual life, right now?
That is the polar opposite of how we consume content today. We speed read articles, we listen to podcasts at 2x speed, we skim for the bullet points at the end.
Which is precisely why we retain almost nothing. We're optimizing for volume of information, not for depth of transformation.
Okay, so slow down. What's the second strategy?
The second strategy is even more aggressive, and I love it. The suggestion is this. Read the book until you find one actionable thing, just one. A single small change you can make.
And then what?
Close the book. Put it away on the shelf. Do not read the next page. Go out into the world and apply that one single thing for a full week. Make it a habit.
That takes so much discipline. My brain is screaming, but I want to know what happens in the next chapter. I need the complete system before I start.
But that curiosity is the enemy of implementation. We use gathering more information as a very sophisticated form of procrastination. Think about it. If you read a 300-page book and do nothing, you have wasted your time. If you read 3 pages and change one tiny habit for the better, you have succeeded. You have to treat the book like a cookbook, not a novel. You don't read a cookbook cover to cover. You pick one recipe and you go cook it.
I love that. Treat it like a cookbook. And I'm assuming accountability plays a huge role here too.
A massive role. A book cannot hold you accountable. It just sits there on the shelf, doesn't know if you lied, it doesn't know if you skipped the hard exercises. But discussing the book with a friend or a partner or ideally a therapist, that forces those internal ideas out into the external world. It makes them real. You've now said it out loud to another human being.
So if we zoom out and try to get the expert consensus on all of this, we've got guys like John Norcross, who seems to be more of an optimist about self-help, and then you have Gerald Rosen, who is the skeptical watchdog of the industry. Where do they meet in the middle? What's the common ground?
They meet at the idea that self-help is a tool, not a cure. It's a supplement. I like to think of it like a vitamin. If you have a specific nutritional deficiency, a vitamin can be incredibly helpful. But a vitamin cannot replace a healthy meal.
And it certainly can't replace a doctor if you have a broken leg.
Exactly. Norcross argues that for the millions of people who can't afford or access traditional therapy, these books are a vital gateway drug to self-improvement. They are, in his view, better than nothing. Rosen, on the other hand, argues that we need to be much more critical consumers to avoid the snake oil and the potential for harm.
And this brings us right back to that holistic view of self-fulfillment we started with. Back to Aristotle and flourishing.
It does. The sources all emphasize that true self-fulfillment is multifaceted. It's not one thing. It requires meaningful work, It requires physical health. But most importantly, it requires relationships and connection.
And a book is, by its very definition, a solitary experience.
That is the great irony of the whole genre. You can spend an entire weekend locked in your room reading a book about how to connect with people. And in the very act of doing so, you are isolating yourself from actual people.
You're studying the theory of connection while practicing the art of isolation.
Precisely. We are trying to solve a communal human need, the deep need for belonging, for purpose, for validation, with a hyper-individualistic commercial product that we consume alone.
Which brings us full circle to that history lesson we started with, that cultural shift from mutual aid to self-help.
It does. And it leaves me with this one big provocative thought. Maybe the reason we feel so unfulfilled even after reading 50 of these books is that we're looking in the wrong direction entirely. We're constantly looking inward, excavating our own psyche, trying to fix ourselves in a vacuum.
When maybe the real answer is to look outward.
Maybe the ultimate self-help isn't about the self at all. Maybe, as the Victorians believed, fulfillment comes from being useful to someone else. Maybe you achieve self-fulfillment not by reading a book about it, but by going next door and helping your elderly neighbor carry in their groceries.
That is a powerful thought. The best way to help yourself is to stop thinking about yourself for 5 minutes.
It's a hypothesis worth testing, at the very least.
So let's wrap this up with some clear marching orders for you, the listener. We've covered a lot of ground today. What are the key takeaways?
Takeaway number 1. Be specific. Self-help works best for specific, problem-focused issues. If you have insomnia, buy a book on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. If you just have a vague sense of existential dread, a book might not be the right tool for the job.
Takeaway number 2. Be skeptical. Learn to spot the false hope trap. If the cover promises a miracle in 30 days, or it talks about the one secret, put it back on the shelf. That's marketing, not psychology.
Takeaway number 3. Remember the compliance problem. The biggest barrier isn't the book. It's the implementation. Your goal is to be in that 4%. Read less, do more.
And finally, that holistic check. Always remember that the book is just a map. It's not the territory. Don't ever confuse highlighting a page with actually changing your life.
And please, don't forget the community aspect. Don't just read alone in your room. Talk about what you're learning.
So here is our challenge for you today. And this is going to sound really bad for the publishing industry, but honestly, we don't care. Do not buy a new self-help book today.
You have enough, we promise.
Go to your shelf or that pile on the floor next to your bed. Pick one book that you already own, just one. Read one chapter, and then find one thing from that chapter and go do it.
Just one thing. Close the book and go do it today.
Break the cycle of passive consumption. Be the architect, not just the reader.
And see what happens.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.